There's nothing quite like JCVD duking it out with Dolph Lundgren. Today we're breaking down the bullets, biceps, and bizarre plot twists that make the Universal Soldier franchise feel like a cybernetic fever dream. Hey friends, Tyler Nichols with JoBlo here, and are you ready to get into some JCVD? Easily one of the best action stars of all time, there are so many of Jean-Claude Van Damme's films that you can look at as great entries in the action genre. He never quite had the budget of a Stallone or a Schwarzenegger, but he always managed to keep the entertainment value high. And his most entertaining of them all may just be the Universal Soldier franchise. I was lucky enough to narrate the first 3 of our 4 videos, written by our WTF extraordinaire Mike Holtz and edited by the wonderful Juan Jimenez. First, we're looking at the film that started it all, with a battle between 2 greats as JCVD and Dolph Lundgren face off in this futuristic world of 1992, where soldiers are reanimated and turned into enhanced super soldiers. Let's talk Universal Soldier. After that, we're looking at the direct-to-video sequel that doesn't even have JCVD in it. That's right, Matt Battaglia takes the spot of the Muscles from Brussels, and it's just as middling as you'd expect. But we kinda had to cover it. Let's get into Universal Soldier, Brother in Arms. Then we're looking at the time that Van Damme came back to the series. Not only that, but WCW wrestler Goldberg joined the franchise. And while it may not have entirely worked, it gave legions of us wrestling fans a chance to see the man do something other than a spear and a jackhammer. We're getting into Universal Soldier, The Return. Finally, we've got Lance Velchek letting us know why you need to give this low-budget legacy sequel, yes, you heard that right, that breaks down the greatness of Universal Soldier, Regeneration. So let's take a look at what JCVD has to offer as we see what the f*** happened to the Universal Soldier franchise. 2 action titans throwing down both on-screen and seemingly off-screen in front of thousands of reporters. A director now known for tentpole disaster flicks, working on a big budget for the first time. Replacing yet another director who couldn't make it work. A script that dips its toes into at least 4 different genres, featuring many shots of Jean-Claude Van Damme's naked body, bullets, bomb, and a whole lot of killing. This is what happened to Universal Soldier. If you were a fan of action movies with a darker sci-fi edge to their storylines in the 80s and 90s, Carolco Pictures was likely behind some of your favorites. By the time Universal Soldier darkened their desks around February of 1990, the company had already been involved with films like First Blood and They Live. This was even before Terminator 2 and Total Recall. If you had a dark action flick, Carolco was the place to take it. Universal Soldier wouldn't come to fruition until 1992. Originally, the studio hired Andrew Davis to helm the Christopher Leitch written project. The director had already been responsible for 2 of Steven Seagal's best films in Above the Law and Under Siege. When it came to taking larger-than-life characters and formulating them into semi-believable films, he was the guy for the job. Until he wasn't. It's said that Davis walked away due to budget concerns and creative differences. A little hard to imagine considering he once managed to keep Steven Seagal's supersized ponytailed ego in check. But alas, one man's FUBAR situation is another man's dream job. Enter Roland Emmerich. Emmerich had been working on another messy film for Carolco at the time, the famously never-made Ridley Scott sci-fi epic called Isobar, where Sylvester Stallone would have fought off against a genetic monster on a high-speed train in the future. Like we said, Carolco had a type, and I miss it dearly. Frequent Emmerich collaborator and future Independence Day writer Dean Devlin was also working on the abandoned project before Carolco decided to scrap it entirely and put the pair on Universal Soldier instead. In the commentary track, Emmerich explained that he took the movie to prove that as an up-and-coming director, he could handle a big film and its accompanying budget. Devlin and Emmerich were brought on board to a project that had already cast its 2 leading men in Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Van Damme was quickly becoming a star off the back of his amazing physical prowess in films like Bloodsport and Kickboxer. He also had the rare ability to be both larger than life and the sympathetic underdog simultaneously, a karate-fueled mix of the 2 personas of Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Lundgren had found fame in his role as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV years before, and solidified himself not only as an amazing physical villain, but someone who could chew some massive scenery. Though at the time, Universal Soldier and its $23 million budget would be the biggest production that Van Damme had ever worked on, he originally rejected the script. citing that he thought it was stupid and that no one would believe in the half-human storyline. After Emmerich and Devlin roundhoused the script a few times, Van Damme came around, praising their work as a special concept. You always wonder with a concept like this how your two lead physical specimens were going to react to sharing the screen together. Dolph had seen Bloodsport and kept hearing of what he called this tough Belgian before meeting him in person at the Coralco offices. His first impressions were that he was a smart and clever man, not only when it came to filmmaking, but with his personal image. The two also bonded over the fact that they weren't fans of the first script that they'd received before Emmerich and Roland came along, both of them rejecting it. In regard to how Emmerich and Devlin changed the script, they simply formatted around the actors that they already had in tow, playing up what they would call Jean-Claude's sweetness against the contrast of Dolph's darkness, something that they had to coax out of the big guy a bit. But once Dolph bought in, he went all out. And we'd have to agree, whether it was recency bias from Masters of the Universe or an aversion to appreciating the acting abilities of action stars, Dolph Lundgren has been fully appreciated for just how great of a villain that he was in the film. The finally completed screenplay opens up with Lundgren's Sergeant Scott and Van Damme's Luke Devereaux as human soldiers in Vietnam in 1969. Scott is literally crocheting himself a necklace made up of his victim's ears, like it's a goddamn Taylor Swift bracelet swap in hell. He's lost his mind, murdering innocent people. When Devereaux attempts to stop him, the two end up killing each other. The incident is covered up by the army, and they are cryogenically frozen Demolition Man style before being reanimated for the Unisol program, where they bring back the dead with super soldier abilities. They're given a neural serum to keep their memory suppressed, like some sort of non-emo Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But Devereaux has a glitch, holding on to some of his memories and overall humanity, which leads to his old sergeant hunting him down, along with a reporter that he's befriended along the way. The role of the reporter, Veronica Roberts, went to the charismatic Ali Walker. Her and Jean-Claude had a great relationship on the set, which came across in their performances, specifically in comedic scenes that included having to bathe his naked body down in ice cubes or cut out a tracking system in his calf while he's bent over, again naked, in front of her. There's a ton of underrated comedy here that often ends up with JCVD naked. The ladies love those buns. During the commentary, Emmerich joked about these scenes, saying that they were required by law back then to show Jean-Claude's ass in every film. He joked that you would receive a fine if you didn't, but he also praised Jean-Claude's awareness of what his fans wanted and felt compelled to give it to them in a way that incorporated itself naturally in the story. If you're wondering about semantics, Emmerich has you and him covered, saying he had like a little sock over it, like a little thing. Jesus, Roland, take it easy with the word little. Van Damme wouldn't appreciate that. Jokes aside, what critics mistook for unintentional comedy, Devlin would explain was actually very intentional. They were trying to make fun of action movies, but be one at the same time, which really adds an ahead of its time meta Kevin Williamson, Wes Craven element to the film. While there was darkness at times, it was, like Scream, in contrast to some of the more comedic moments. For example, you have Dolph Lundgren's character chewing scenery in a grocery store, delivering a dark monologue and shooting police, while somewhere else, Van Damme hilariously learns how much he likes to eat, while effortlessly kicking the shit out of a bunch of rednecks. Going back and experiencing Universal Soldier in 4K in the year 2025, you also realize just how much of a visual cinematic achievement it is. From an opening fight scene in Vietnam that was filmed on a golf course in Arizona, to a chase scene featuring large military vehicles across the breathtaking backdrop of the Grand Canyon. Amongst its endless action, the production featured no CGI, and only one scene that included the use of a model. A scene that went back and forth between live-action shots and a model of two large vehicles plunging from the top of a mountain and exploding in the desert. It's a gorgeously shot, wide-scope film from cinematographer Carl Walter Lindenlaub. Not to mention well-choreographed action scenes from Emmerich and crew, featuring Universal soldiers careening face first and down the Hoover Dam from 700 feet up, or building a motel from scratch just to fire over 10,000 rounds of ammunition and drive a classic car through it. All of this bookended by two kick-ass throwdowns between two of the greatest action heroes to ever grace the silver screen, the latter of which was almost very different, in a bad way. The film's original ending, which can be found on multiple physical media editions, Devereaux dispatches Scott after he ruthlessly shoots his mother down on the porch. As Devereaux goes to reunite with Veronica, His supposed father shockingly shoots him before Jerry Orbach's Dr. Gregor shows up with a bunch of dudes in trench coats. Gregor hastily explains that these aren't actually Devereaux's parents, but merely plants meant to help capture him. His fake father and the henchmen then start unloading their guns into him like he's Michael Myers at the end of Halloween 4. We get a weird T2-style epilogue from Veronica about how Devereaux spent his last 2 months of life surrounded by his real family, rejecting all medical treatment and teaching her the meaning of life: depression. Roland admitted that everyone was excited, high-fiving, and having a great time in the moment, until the ending left them quite dismayed and confused. They hated it, and all of this weirdly depressing Meet Joe Black nonsense was taken out of the film and replaced with an extended fight scene reshoot instead. The reshoots took place inside the barn over the course of a single day's 24-hour-long shoot, flawlessly edited into the original ending. We still end the fight with Devereaux triple kicking Scott into the hay harvester and dropping, "You're discharged, Sarge." Before watching Scott's remains fly ears first out of the grinder. Only in this case, we're treated first to an extended fight scene, where Scott beats Devereaux's ass all around the barn, until Devereaux finds some super serum, jacks himself up, and delivers the kind of underdog ass whooping that the best action movies are made of. The fight scenes were great, and so was the relationship between the two leads. Dolph explained that at first there was some tension between the two on the first day because of their competitive natures, but all of that dissipated rather quickly, as the two spent the next 3 months beating the hell out of each other on set. Jean-Claude would tell a story of how they kept a truck on set full of training gear and mirrors. JCVD would later use his healthy competition as a marketing ploy when the two actors were at the Cannes Film Festival. Ever the self-promoter, Van Damme knew the film was still in post-production and that they had no footage to promote. So he called up Dolph, and the two staged a fake dust-up in front of hundreds of members of the press at the event, thinking that they were witnessing a real-life scuffle between the two action titans. The two exchanged some words and a few light shoves before they were harmlessly broken up. Mission accomplished, as it was all anyone could talk about. That's what I call viral marketing. Universal Soldier released in 1992 to a worldwide gross of $95 million on a $23 million budget. That's no Avatar, of course, and critics unfortunately weren't quite capable of understanding its genius. But that didn't stop it from becoming beloved, spawning multiple sequels, a comic book series, and even a video game. Those involved with the film many years later seem happy with the result as well. Dolph remembers it as a career boost for everyone involved. Writer Dean Devlin sees it as a fun and original film, and even Roland Emmerich, who hates watching his earlier work, admits that it was better than he originally thought. Damn straight, Roland. Damn straight. And that is what happened to Universal Soldier. There's a big difference between a popular IP that chooses to expand into television and a possible blockbuster movie franchise that inexplicably dumps a direct sequel there. The movie we're talking about today didn't merely replace the characters from its predecessor, it refilmed its original ending with new actors. I guess in an attempt to make the abrupt change easier for audiences to swallow? Except here's the problem. The main character he's replacing was one of the most famous people on the planet at the time. And this new guy didn't look, sound, or act anything like him at all, ever. For some reason, this type of thing would often happen with Jean-Claude Van Damme films, particularly during his heyday in the 80s and 90s. Many times he would star in a movie that seemed to be a sure franchise starter, only for the sequel to have half the budget, half the quality, and no JCVD. It happened with Bloodsport, Time Cop, and eventually even with Hard Target. You don't even want to know what they did with the character of Kurt Sloan in Kickboxer 2. Oh, it still hurts to think about. How we got here involves everything from bankruptcy, the never-made James Cameron Spider-Man film, and the social network of Burt Reynolds back when he played college football for Florida State. This is the story of how one of Roland Emmerich and Jean-Claude Van Damme's best films during the high point of the 90s ended up getting a direct-to-television sequel starring a former Eagles linebacker and Eric Roberts. Gary Busey, excuse me. This is what happened to Universal Soldier 2: Brothers in Arms.
secure the bodies for resurrection.
Though Roland Emmerich's Universal Soldier is an underrated and underappreciated sci-fi action classic, the reviews at the time wrongly saw it as a Terminator 2 ripoff. Makes no sense now, but this was the golden age of films like Total Recall and Point Break. Perhaps folks had become a little spoiled, and who can blame them? Either way, for whatever reason, Universal Soldier didn't exactly go ham at the box office in 1992.
I just want to eat.
It was seen as more of a moderate success with a solid box office return. Though the story opportunities were endless, a sequel wasn't by any means guaranteed, especially for a studio like Carolco Pictures, who, despite all their successes, were teetering on the edge of the financial abyss. By 1995, Carolco Pictures had gone bankrupt for a variety of reasons. Overpaying stars such as Schwarzenegger and Stallone, art house films that just didn't pan out, and even trying and failing to produce a James Cameron Spider-Man flick starring Leonardo DiCaprio. An attempt that only landed them in the throes of multiple lawsuits with seemingly everyone, including Marvel. It's safe to say that they were in no position to take a gamble on an expensive follow-up to a film that hadn't exactly been lucrative to begin with. In the midst of shedding assets, they managed to squeeze out what they could in a sale of television rights to Universal Soldier to a company called Skyvision Entertainment. These days, it would likely end in a Paramount or Amazon series. In 1995, it meant TV films. At the time, Skyvision was owned by the Labatt Company. If that rings a bell, it's the beer company that owns Molson Canadian Beer, a beer that is, whether on purpose or serendipitously, actually featured in a dumb scene in the film, meant to replicate the diner moment in Universal Soldier.
According to the Surgeon General, consumption of alcoholic beverages impairs your ability to drive a motor vehicle. I think the Surgeon General might be onto something.
I said meant to. Skyvision had an interesting business plan to take successful movie franchises and turn them into television shows, which they had just achieved with the RoboCop TV series. Before they were able to hash out an idea for Universal Soldier, however, Labatt sold to a company far less interested in this endeavor. Still, one of their executives revived the idea for a company called Catalyst Entertainment, which, for better or worse, much worse, is how we got here.
You just say you wanted to command again. Meet your new army.
The story of Universal Soldier 2 is written by Peter M. Lenkov, whose resume is likely going to surprise you. He previously wrote the story for Pauly Shore's Son-in-Law and followed that up with the action sci-fi classic Demolition Man. Though he doesn't bat 1,000, he's obviously a creative writing mind that would go on to write for many successful TV shows. He would even go on to create the comic book series R.I.P.D., though Brother-in-Arms is definitely not the best showcase of that talent. As mentioned, the story picks up from the original ending. After the fight between Devereaux and Sergeant Scott, there's some awkward smooching between Devereaux and reporter lady Veronica that, let's just say, would feel extremely creepy were the roles reversed. Then suddenly, Devereaux hilariously just pieces out from his parents' farm without saying a word to anyone. Veronica, possibly a stage 5 clinger, goes after him. She takes the brand new, expensive, and bright-ass orange sports car that their country parents have kept hidden in their quaint farmhouse on the investigation. That makes sense though, because the car had belonged to his long-lost brother, who had also been missing in action. Wait, brother? Yeah, he wrote Luke a brother who he had an extremely deep connection with, that he just so happened to never mention or flash back to during the first film. It's fine. Luke allows himself to be captured by the Unisol Project so that he can free his brother, who they've apparently held captive this entire time. Veronica catches up and breaks in as well, because this top-secret government organization has the security of a Dollar Tree diary lock. The three of them then go on the run from the new and underfunded Unisol program, which might just be a hilarious and meta wink at the camera, knowing that we're watching a film that is in the same boat as far as having its budget slashed. Experienced television director Jeff Woolnough was brought on to direct after helming episodes of TV series like Stargate SG-1 and Earth: The Final Conflict. Both the writer, director, and entire team would also helm the follow-up sequel, Universal Soldier 3: Unfinished Business, which was shot back-to-back with Brothers in Arms. The movies were shot in Canada over 42 days, with a combined budget of $10.7 million. Not at all horrible for two TV films in the 90s, but there are just so many questions about what they did with it. The choreography of the fight between Luke Devereaux and Sarge to open things up is pretty much the exact same. So is the dialogue, all the way down to the
"You're discharged, Sarge"
whip before Devereaux turns him into a meat kebab. It's all kind of a shock to the system to watch because it just doesn't work. Luke had been recast by former Philadelphia Eagles linebacker Matt Battaglia, who had shown up at the production office asking to read for the role. Allegedly, he got the green light when more than 15 secretaries were fawning over his audition tape. But he wasn't by any means an unseasoned actor. The football player turned actor had already been making appearances in movies and TV for nearly a decade, having appeared on everything from 21 Jump Street to Friends. It didn't work, not because Battaglia was a bad actor. He actually managed to somehow keep the character somewhat likable, despite being put through some incredibly cringe moments. Moments like singing gospel with a random Nick Cave lookalike, because a Unisol wouldn't understand kissing or beer but would be able to nail the cadence of a Johnny Cash type backup singer? Huh? Victoria's Ally Walker was recast by Puppet Master 4 and 5's Chandra West, who, to be honest, resembled the character she was replacing more than anyone else in the production. The big names on the docket in this film come in the form of the bad guys. Gary Busey, as the new Unisol manager, spends a lot of time in front of the camera doing very little. It's almost a late career Steven Seagal type of performance, as he just walks around the set dropping unmemorable one-liners like,
Secure the bodies for resurrection.
There are at least a couple of solid, crazy Busey faces made when the shit hits the fan, and that's nice at least. Speaking of hilarious, Burt fucking Reynolds shows up in this film out of absolutely nowhere as a character named The Mentor. He's the head of the CIA and the secret ringleader of Unisol, appearing at first only from the nose down in a phone conversation, verbally spanking Busey for losing some diamonds. Even weirder, he is unmistakably and inexplicably using an Irish accent at the time.
He took first team into the field 36 hours ago. He hasn't checked in yet.
Which he inexplicably completely drops when his character is fully revealed at the end.
I will not have this agenda derailed. Yes, sir.
It's pure pandemonium. Reynolds did the film as a favor to his friend Battaglia, whose father he had met playing football at Florida State, though Battaglia gushed to Cinefantastique magazine about working with the ultra-kind Reynolds. It was clear he didn't have the same affinity for Busey. When asked about working with the Lethal Weapon actor, Battaglia said he would prefer to stay diplomatic and not speak on the subject, just that he enjoyed working with Reynolds quite a bit more. The final product of Brothers in Arms, if we're being honest, is not great. There are around 5 different moments in the film where a totally average scene will get dragged out into a music video for several minutes. A character will be walking down the street, and suddenly everything is in slow motion while a rock song plays out and everyone does Blue Steel. It's super fucking weird. The brothers try to show a deep and loving relationship with each other while attempting to sustain their robotic mannerisms. The result is like watching two confused rocks trying to hug each other. Luke's brother Eric, played by Jeff Wincott, does his best to interject himself into the story. It just doesn't mesh. Not to mention, these two look the furthest thing possible from related. The set decoration had no sense of continuity either. One moment we're in what looks like an evil villain lair from Batman Forever that houses Unisol experiments gone wrong, and the next we spend 30 minutes in an empty parking lot. The film is unfortunately a mess from opening shot to post-production edits. It's a tough watch and rarely entertaining in any way. Brothers in Arms was released on Showtime subsidiary, the Movie Channel, in September of 1998, smartly airing alongside the original Universal Soldier. A year later, Paramount Home Video even released a VHS copy of the film. Imagine that. They used to make physical media out of even television movies back then. Now we're lucky to get an Oppenheimer 4K. It's now available on DVD as well. Understandably, the reviews weren't great, The film has the rare distinction of holding a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Even IMDb scores it a lowly 2.9 out of 10. The franchise went on to delete both films from its canon just a year later, when Van Damme and Michael J. White returned to the franchise with 1999's Universal Soldier: The Return. It's hard to say what went wrong here, apart from it being a bad idea in the first place. But to be fair to those who put work into the film, from Battaglia to the writer and director, each of them went on to do far more successful and rewarding projects with their careers. It's nice to see that we were all able to overcome this one. And that, my friends, is what happened to Universal Soldier 2: Brothers in Arms. In 1992, the now acclaimed director Roland Emmerich, alongside action superstars Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, created Universal Soldier, a movie that was maybe underappreciated in the golden age of action films, but nonetheless a highlight in all of their careers. We're big fans here at JoBlo. Regardless, financial issues loom for the studio that created it. This resulted in rights being sold and two mostly horrendous television shows being released on Showtime, starring Gary Busey and Burt Reynolds of all people. 7 years later, in 1999, the franchise would attempt its big screen comeback, with the legendary Jean-Claude Van Damme desperate for a career win, on a project that no director seemed willing to touch. Would the result be a resurrection of not only the franchise, but its leading man's once unstoppable career, or one of the final nails in the coffin of both of their big screen futures? This is what the fuck happened to Universal Soldier: The Return. Though moderately successful, it wasn't long after the release of the original Universal Soldier that Carolco Pictures went bankrupt. Though the company had several successful action hits such as Cliffhanger and Total Recall, years of losing money due to financial setbacks, such as the ill-fated Cutthroat Island, left the studio in shambles. In the shakeup, the television rights to Universal Soldier were sold, resulting in two straight-to-TV sequels in the franchise: Universal Soldier 2: Brothers in Arms and Universal Soldier 3: Unfinished Business. The quality of both of these films were rather forgettable, and the entire time Universal Soldier producer Craig Baumgarten was itching to give the franchise the legit sequel that it deserved. The rights eventually made their way to Baumgarten Profit Entertainment, alongside TriStar Pictures, who distributed the first film, as well as Sony Pictures Entertainment. Jean-Claude Van Damme was no doubt looking to return to box office domination after some rough outings with films like Maximum Risk and the Dennis Rodman team-up Double Team. It seemed as if a sequel to one of his classic films could be the solution. Unfortunately, the muscles from Brussels had burned a lot of bridges at this point in his career, making a return to possible franchises like Time Cop unlikely. However, a multi-picture deal with Sony had the studio willing to take a chance on the actor once more, despite the previous box office disappointments, such as the very underrated Sudden Death. They greenlit a Universal Soldier theatrical sequel with one caveat: the film had to remain under a budget of $35 million. A script for an original project written by Another 48 Hours and later Darkness Falls writer John Fasano was found and adapted into a sequel for the franchise, much in the same way that 10 Cloverfield Lane had been changed to fit its respective franchise years later. This, alongside the help of The Return's original director William Malone. Malone secured the job on the sequel after his work on horror projects such as Tales from the Crypt and the Freddy Krueger television series Freddy's Nightmares. He had hoped to create a more reserved, horror-laden sequel to push the franchise forward. Unfortunately, JCVD was keen to make the same type of high-flying, action-packed film that his audience perhaps expected of him, even despite the film's modest budget. The impasse ultimately led to Malone leaving the project and instead going to work on the surprisingly entertaining horror remake House on Haunted Hill instead. With the pre-production process taking longer than expected, the studio reached out to multiple other directors, including Roland Emmerich, with none of them showing interest in the project. This led them to Mel Gibson's longtime stunt double and first-time director Mick Rogers. Rogers had a history in action films due to his successful stunt career, working on films such as Braveheart and Lethal Weapon, but had no experience directing whatsoever. In the final script, the events of The Return would predictably ignore the events of the two previous sequels. instead directly following up the original film. We're now 15 years past the events of the original, and Luke Devereaux has now been converted back into a normal human being. You just kind of have to ignore the fact that this somehow means the Unisoul program basically solved the issue of human death, and go with it. Not to mention, Devereaux is now working for the very company that put him through hell, helping to refine the new generation of Unisouls. The company's moral focus is no doubt much more developed, and they're now solely focused on reducing human casualties of war with their updated breed of soldiers. All this with the help of a futuristic AI program known as Seth, connected to each of the Unisouls via neural implants. Seth can do everything from control the Unisouls to babysit Devereaux's daughter. When the budget cuts promise to shut down the program entirely, Seth picks up on the betrayal and goes full-blown Skynet. The company computer unleashes a group of Unisouls to do its bidding, attempting to kill Devereaux, as he's the only one left alive with the code that can shut down its system. All this leads to Devereaux surviving the attack of a group of new and improved Unisouls while trying to keep his daughter alive, alongside his new and attractive reporter friend caught in the crossfire. At one point, Devereaux drops the honestly pretty cool line that the only way is to blow them up
and hope the pieces don't keep fighting us.
Meanwhile, Seth has managed to put his supercomputer essence into the brain of the most dangerous of all the Unisouls, a body inhabited by none other than actor Michael J. White. Alongside physical specimens JCVD and Michael J. White, the film casts wrestler Bill Goldberg as the most morally bankrupt Unisoul, Romeo, ironically in a role that they originally had Stone Cold Steve Austin in mind for. Though Goldberg, who the director called an Energizer Bunny on steroids, was over the top and honestly corny throughout, physically he was a fun and formidable physical opponent for Van Damme, who always thrived as the underdog. The love interest, reporter Aaron Walker, is played by Heidi Shans, but was originally intended as a return of Ali Walker, who left the project early on due to other scheduled commitments. They instead killed her character off between films, leaving Devereaux as a single parent to their daughter. Terminator 2's Todd, actor Xander Berkeley, plays one of the good guy geniuses responsible for the creation of Seth, who's dispatched a little too early in the film. RoboCop 3 and Super Troopers actor, the late Daniel Von Bargen, plays an army general trying to help stop Seth. Character actor Brett Hinckley rounds out the cast as a cartoonish and over-the-top guy in the chair cyberpunk who listens to Gwar and helps Seth find his human form while eating cereal with a giant wooden spoon. The ambitious script for The Return notwithstanding, the film is merely an action-packed science fiction fight movie with various metal songs blasting off in the background. Not only was Goldberg's WCW entrance song Crush 'Em by Megadeth featured at the wrestler's request, but so were songs from everyone from Static X to Anthrax. In another metal tie-in, the Texas-filmed Flick even featured a strip club called The Clubhouse, which was, in real life, owned by Pantera's Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell. We're not talking Citizen Kane by any means, but Universal Soldier: The Return still makes for a non-stop action roller coaster with a plethora of fun fight scenes. The now human Devereaux has to repeatedly take on a semi-scary, mostly cheesy Goldberg, who is constantly resurrecting and appearing around a corner in pure Michael Myers fashion. With the persistence of a Terminator, his prize, a final showdown with Seth's ultimate Unisoul in Michael J. White, where they repeatedly throw each other through a buffet of glass structures. Like it's a goddamn fun house. The film walks a thin line between forgettable straight-to-video action fare and fun 90s action movie with no fat left on the bone. Jean-Claude Van Damme seemed healthy, in prime physical shape, and far more committed than in recent films such as Street Fighter. During promotion, he even mentioned that he had been training hard for a film that required him to be quick and in good shape for copious amounts of action scenes within. Regardless, a lengthy pre-production and reshoots ended up ballooning the budget to around $40 million, and disastrous test screenings led the studio to take control of its edit. All told, The Return ended up with a running time of only an hour and 23 minutes. In the hope that more screenings would provide a better box office return, this proved to be an unsuccessful endeavor. Universal Soldier: The Return would finally release domestically on August 20th, 1999, and the results were dismal. The movie would only make just over $10 million domestically, with less than $3 million international. The reviews were even worse. As of today, The Return sits at a measly 5% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with a not much better audience score of 24%. Reviews were savage and called the film, perhaps unfairly, idiotic, derivative, mind-numbing, and disappointing. The unfortunate result of all of this for our beloved Jean-Claude Van Damme was equally hurtful. Apart from a voice acting role in 2011's Kung Fu Panda 2, the actor wouldn't be seen on a big screen again until 2012's The Expendables 2, in a rare villain role where he's pitted against Sylvester Stallone. Though that movie did end in a pretty cool final fight scene between the two action legends. Villain Michael J. White isn't exactly fond in his recollection of the film either. In a long after-the-fact interview, the martial arts actor stated that he remembers the movie being dumb as hell and one of the worst movies he's been in throughout the entirety of his career, which, to be fair, is saying a lot. Jean-Claude at least felt positively about it at the time, saying he felt that The Return was all in all a good movie, with a lot of roller coaster-esque action sequences, that it featured actors in prime physical condition resulting in believable fight sequences. In reality, director Mick Rogers would never direct another film. The subsequent sequel a decade later, Universal Soldier Regeneration, also starring Van Damme and bringing back Dolph Lundgren, would again cut this film out of franchise canon, deeming itself a direct sequel to the original. Though Universal Soldier: The Return turned out to be a disappointment both financially and critically, it might be fair to say that it's a little better than given credit for. Sure, there are some questionable choices, dialogue, and acting moments. No doubt some bargain bin, music video quality cheese sprinkled throughout its brisk running time, but it also features a script with some interesting ideas about the Unisol program being led by a malicious AI-powered computer. Most importantly, it's a fun, turn-your-brain-off action movie with a ton of go-for-it action sequences and extended fight scenes. Universal Soldier: The Return is at its best a fun throwback to the action days of old, and undoubtedly a far better entry in the franchise than the two television films that preceded it, and most importantly, long live Jean-Claude Van Damme. And that is what the fuck happened to Universal Soldier: The Return.
Universal Soldier was a successful action sci-fi road trip movie, one that put rising star Jean-Claude Van Damme against Drago himself, Dolph Lundgren. It made a decent penny, and though the critics were mixed, genre fans loved it. But we never got a true sequel. The Return was an odd mix of trying to rehash the past, while not feeling truly connected to the character we knew and loved. But what if I told you there was a low-budget, straight-to-DVD sequel that came 17 years after the original? One directed by John Hyams, the son of Peter, director of Time Cop and Sudden Death. A sequel that reinvented the Unisol world into a nihilistic and grounded action flick that respected the source material, rightfully ditched anything from The Return, and put on some of the best fights and action scenes of the 2000s. And of course, reunited Jean-Claude and Dolph. Many of you probably haven't seen it or assumed it as a late career cash grab, and by this cover, I don't blame you.
What the fuck is this?
But Universal Soldier Regeneration is one of the best action sequels out there, and here's why. Now, before I begin, I want to give you a spoiler-free sell on why you should give this a chance. It deals with the grounded aftermath of Luke being a reanimated soldier and the mind f*** of trying to reintegrate into society when your only purpose is to kill. It's set around a hostage situation at Chernobyl, cloning, and the grittiness of 2008's Rambo. Universal Soldier was a moderately big-budget action movie that played into the stylings of the late 80s with some of the charm and slickness the 90s would provide. And it gave Jean-Claude a change of pace from the street crime and tournament movies he was known for. And yeah, I know, Cyborg is in there too, but a lot of folks weren't digging it at the time. You can check out my take when you have a moment. But Universal Soldier had an interesting concept. Roland Emmerich had a good eye at the time, and it blended action, sci-fi, war, trauma, and some fish-out-of-water humor.
How was lunch, huh?
And it starred Van Damme, who is in his golden era as an action star. You'd think a sequel would be an easy win, but with some rights complications, a studio that was bleeding cash, and some shit Showtime TV sequels, it wasn't until 1999 that we got the official return of Luke Devereaux. And yeah, this wasn't it.
Why would you want to help him?
Seth's a self-evolving organic intelligence. That's what you don't understand.
It was really a sequel in name only. And this is where many fans and casual watchers checked out. So by 2008, the start of this production, interest in the franchise was dead and gone. I'm no stranger to a timeline switch, and after the return made no one happy, ignoring it and connecting this story to the original was the only good move. Where is Luke this many years later?
Psychological rehabilitation, as Dr. Fleming calls it.
Not a normal functioning adult of some random kid.
Hillary! Whoa!
Victor Ostrovsky and John Hyams needed a shakeup. Where can you take the story that is not only fresh but feels appropriate in the world brought to life by Roland Emmerich? As much as I was let down by The Return, it was in the same general ballpark tonally of Universal Soldier. It was just the wrong mixture, the wrong lessons learned. That awe-inspiring, optimistic approach to the genre was gone. And I should say, Universal Soldier isn't a super light movie either. It has its moments of levity, but still took the concept seriously. This series had the DNA of dark and violent situations, dying in battle, being brought back as a tool, one for the purpose of killing in obedience. It's not far-fetched to want to explore these ideas in a grounded arena. It's still an action movie, but one that's filtered through a dark, suspenseful thriller that has bouts of brutal, stripped-down, and intense action. Nowadays, there's more of a pushback against such nihilism because it's being used in awkward and ill-fitting ways. The Luke here is viewed more as Frankenstein's monster, a vet who's dealing with being a reanimated corpse, pumped full of drugs and working for the government. The mood should absolutely be grumpy. Van Damme handles his new take on Luke with empathy and fear. You feel bad for him, but the arc always had to be the man from Nam ain't coming back. So let's let him do what he does best. And the last incident before the government takes their property back is him having an episode, finding threats where there are none. A man not meant for society. Right from the jump, we're thrown into an intense kidnapping, the threat of a nuclear attack, and the newer Unisol model. And how the soldiers are represented here is respectful but different. They're still cold and emotionless, but there's a bigger focus on being the perfect killer, which paints them in a creepier light. Director John Hyams described them as guard dogs with a sole focus. Andrei Arlovsky's Next Generation Unisol is one of the best new villains I've seen in years. He is pure business, and we're shown this by him stalking his prey. It's the end for any unlucky soul who wanders into his territory. Arlovsky came to work here and owned it. I loved him. We get the return of Dolph's Andrew Scott, a clone of the original who malfunctions right out the gate and is absolutely my favorite addition to this movie. How the character is handled, how they approach him at this stage is clever, sad, and all-out menacing. There's something surprisingly soulful about his yearning for understanding.
You often contemplate the complexity of life.
Yes. Trying to get some kind of answer. Been over this all before.
The diagnostic questioning was a smart addition. It's meant to keep the machine at bay and snuff out any semblance of life, but backfires as Scott starts to remember. He sees his reflection and some sort of memories return. And it's this confusion, a clone of a reanimated dead soldier, that takes him in a fascinating direction. He's not necessarily evil like he was in the original. No poor villager's ears are used as a necklace, but his being, the pure essence of him, ponders the complexity of life.
You often contemplate the complexity of life.
The action takes a more documentary approach, following one point of view per scene. Having Arlovsky's NGU protect the hive, to Luke's entrance into the battlefield. Hyams doesn't stylize for the dramatics, but lets the action play out in more of a POV kind of way. It's impressive, especially on the small budget they had to work with. Luke versus Andrew is more destruction-based. Two behemoths trying to get the upper hand and destroying everything in their path. Plus, having Andrew remember that thing he wanted to tell Luke and never gets to, nice touch.
I knew I had something to tell you.
You should remember what I wanted to tell you.
While Luke's entrance is both gunplay and hand-to-hand, I should say there's something so beautiful about watching Luke knife his way through goon after goon after goon. And of course, the NGU's battle with Luke is impressive. We get a 48-year-old Van Damme showing he still has the goods, giving us an intense, bone-breaking fight that outdoes anything from the first. The look is bleak with a cool color palette, and Peter Hyams as the DP. The score is haunting with Chris Hill and Michael Krasner delivering a great synth ambient soundtrack. And hell, I mean, even the smaller characters hold some weight. Carrie Shale's Dr. Cullen is the perfect amount of snotty and smart. I kind of loved how foolishly arrogant he was. And he's always reminded me of Wallace Shaw from Princess Bride. And I'm glad the director confirmed it. Zachary Baharov played the general with a good amount of humanity and gave his villain a decent amount of gray. While Emily Joyce's Dr. Fleming had the perfect amount of parental care for Luke. Her volunteering to give him the serum that will reverse all of her hard work, it was bittersweet, and a cool moment in the film. But the question is, how the hell does such a late, straight-to-DVD sequel, and I know that was just in the United States, that had a small budget, produce such a smart and kick-ass reinvention of a property that ran out of steam at its first official sequel?
Are you happy?
I really want to give credit to John Hyams and team for creating a brilliant addition that in many ways outshines the original. The dark turn felt appropriate. The action was expertly choreographed. I mean, that's just pure and filtered carnage. And it treated the classic characters with reverence and aged them in unique ways that felt like a natural and organic progression. Now, there's even a darker and bleaker sequel, one that expands the world and has a more of a passing the baton. And I'd love to cover it if you guys are interested. But you could easily take Regeneration as the series' official ending if you wanted to. Listen, this is one of the best sequels out there, and I wish it got the accolades and respect I believe it deserves. So if you haven't seen it in a while, give it another watch, and if not, seek this out. You won't be disappointed.
You are a punctual and reliable person.
Yes.
Friends find you impulsive and unpredictable.
No.
You often contemplate the complexity of life.
Yes.
Is it necessary for you to question the things you don't know?
No.
You often contemplate the complexity of life. Wait a second.
What do you think of the Universal Soldier series? Do you have a favorite entry? Do you have any recommendations of stuff that we should cover on the channel? Get in those comments and let us know. And thanks for watching.
Seems like the world is moving on. Didn't stop to look around. Didn't give a shit if you're crashing down. You can close your eyes but not your skin. Don't believe what you refuse to see.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.